What's going on, guys? Today I wanted to make a video about Serge Nubret. So of course this channel is about natural bodybuilding, but I think it would be a shame not to get inspired by some of the old school bodybuilders who, in my opinion, some of them had great work ethic, and so some of them, in my opinion, should be presented on this channel. And what we could do is simply I present to you the old school bodybuilder and I tell you everything that I think as a natural bodybuilder you could take from him and learn from. So we'll go through their main beliefs and their best advice. We're gonna analyze their program, how they built their routine, and what we can take from them as naturals. So if you didn't know, Serge Nubret is one of the most iconic and beloved bodybuilder, old school bodybuilder in the world. From the 70s and 80s, he was very famous at this time, and still he managed to pass on his legacy across the years and the decades. And you can see through all his accomplishments here that in the world of bodybuilding, it's quite a lot, and so he is an accomplished bodybuilder. Serge Nubret was known as the Black Panther, and he was born in 1938. He's a French man born in Guadeloupe, as we say in French, and he had an actor career, a very small and modest one compared to Arnold Schwarzenegger, but I think it's still interesting to mention. As you may know, he competed as well with Arnold Schwarzenegger at the Olympia. He finished second, and we've also seen him in the Pumping Iron movie. He was quite a guy that wasn't there for like the cameras, etc. So you don't see him as much as other people. He was, the guy on the side training very hard. And in that aspect as well, I think we can respect him. He's just the guy that really loved bodybuilding. Wasn't there particularly for, the big things. That's one of his character traits that is interesting to note. The guy was just really purely loving bodybuilding. I think the Pumping Iron movie, he wasn't quite for it. He was more like just there to train and to win the Olympia. And so that's what we can also remember about him. To finish this introduction, we can say that, Serge Nubret was overall training with what we could say is rather lightweight. And, this video is cool because, as I said, as natural bodybuilders, I'm here also to give advice. And again, to remind that lightweight don't really mean anything. What is lightweight for someone will be heavyweight for someone else. And in natural bodybuilding, what's important is to objectively lift heavy weights, but that feels light to you. So for example, if you're someone who is benching 3 plates and you can do 10 reps, it might be lightweight for your level, but objectively it's heavyweight. And what this means is that you're just strong and that you can actually build a lot of muscle because you're strong and you can play with heavy weights objectively. And so you do hypertrophy with this heavy weight. So that's why everything that is light, that is heavy to you today should become light one day as you progress. That's called, progression. And so when we talk about lightweight, we're just saying that Serge Nubret was lifting heavy weights objectively for most of the people, but to him it felt light, and over time he was always improving, which is the goal of bodybuilding, improving over time to build more muscle. Serge Nubret didn't really want to injure himself or something of this sort, and that he was rather focusing on high reps, which was still objectively heavy for most of us. Serge Nubret training was going up to 5 or 6 hours almost every day, which is something we'll talk about again, but very respectable. Just like Arnold Schwarzenegger training very hard, or like Lou Ferrigno. These were the kind of like old school bodybuilders that absolutely loved bodybuilding and knew that they could train a lot and that this would actually benefit them, oppositely to what we think today. Sometimes today we really focus on, over quality, which is very important, but like sometimes people forget how much the drugs help them. And this is something also to finish this little introduction of biography about Serge Nubret. He absolutely didn't like the way bodybuilding was heading, with more and more drugs rather than hard work. And this is something we'll come back to it later. Now that we finished the introduction, I'm gonna get into what was the most impressive. So the first chapter I would say about this of this video for Serge Nubret, what's the most impressive about him. So Serge Nubret was, in my opinion, the most impressive about him that we can really remember is that he is an aesthetic freak. The guy had, you know, the same kind of brightness to him as Frank Zane had, a very aesthetic physique. He was also super lean, and I think if he was making a comeback with such a shape today, in my opinion, he would probably destroy some of the guys that we see today that were competing at the highest level. The guy was probably built for bodybuilding. Like, he has a massive chest, just something that was quite typical, by the way, of the old school bodybuilders back then. But you can also see his shoulders were, you know, boulder shoulders. Like, they were awesome shoulders, which is pretty rare to have both great shoulders and good chest. Usually it's one or the other that when you do your exercise takes over. But this guy managed to like split them in the right way and to actually build an awesome chest and awesome shoulders at the same time. Overall, Serge Nubret has such an aesthetic physique. Like, it looks like his body was just strong parts everywhere. The guy was built for bodybuilding. And you can also add to this something very important is the tiny waist. Serge Nubret had a very tiny waist, and so all of the other muscle were actually all great and strong parts, and you add this tiny waist to it, and you just have an incredible bodybuilder that took advantage of this to do a lot of hard work. You see, Serge Nubret had a very good back as well. And what's incredible is that despite having, you know, a great back and this V-taper also thanks to having a tiny waist, he also had incredible arms, whether it's triceps or biceps. And he had long biceps, but also still a peak with his biceps. So despite having long biceps, which sometimes, you know, can make it look like you don't have much of a peak, Serge Nubret still managed to have like a good peak for his biceps. So the guy just had it all together, incredible physique. So for naturals, it's good to remind simply that it's not because you have certain genetics that you can't work around it. And usually in the natural bodybuilding community, a lot of fake ideas are that, you know, you're limited by your genetics. You know, you can't say that before you've trained for like 10 or 15 years or even more than that. Usually there is something to do to build mass, and usually it's due to wrong training and not understanding how to do this. So again, it's good to remind this for natural bodybuilders. So what was impressive about Serge Nubret, another thing in my opinion, which I respect a lot, is how hard he worked in the gym. The guy would do very high volume sessions. He would spend, you know, 5 hours, 6 hours there and just do very high volume. So as I said earlier, you know, that was more of like a lightweight approach. So it's not light, it's heavy weight, but for him that feels light because he's very strong, and that's why he's so big. When you start lifting heavy weights objectively, that feels light. That's when you start building muscle, and that you improve this over time. And because he was enhanced also, I think he was intelligent about not getting injured, and that, as we know, doing a lot of very heavy lifts if you're enhanced can be actually quite dangerous. So I think he had this approach of, okay, let's do a lot of volume that, you know, as an enhanced bodybuilder you can take, and even as a natural, to be honest. But here you have a better response, you know, under the drugs. Like, it's not, you can do more pump training in a sense as a non-natural and still benefit from it. So I think he had this approach of longevity in a sense that he wanted to not rush things, but still train very hard, and the high rep approach was better for him. What I can say for naturals today, whether you hesitate to do like a high rep type of program or rather short, objectively what's good is to do strength work at the start, because strength work helps you get stronger overall, and then this strength you can reuse it when you do higher reps on more isolation movement, for example, where you build a muscle. There is an idea in bodybuilding that indeed high reps, you know, time under tension builds muscle, and this is true, but it doesn't build muscle if you don't progress. That's why you need to lift heavier over time, and so there is no problem in doing high reps in bodybuilding as long as you improve. And what's true is that when you add strength work to your workouts, you improve a little bit faster, I think, over time, and so this helps you to be stronger on high rep movements quicker. That's why usually it's good to have a mix of them. And this is why, just doing high reps can be a bit, slow you down a little bit. And that's why, I would advise to do also strength work. But if you're, for example, scared of getting injured or have had injuries before, you can still get along with, just high rep training from the start. You just have to always make sure you measure things and that you will improve over time. A last fact that was impressive about Serge Nubret is that it could actually bench something like 225 kg, which is 500 pounds. So obviously the guy still, was going for like lightweight for him, but then because he always improved over time, he probably tried once or twice, to max out, and this is the result of it. The guy could bench more than 200 kg, 225, knowing how lean he was and that he wasn't the heaviest guy. That's very, very impressive. So now that we've talked about Serge Nubret, and I'm sure there would be so many more things to say about the guy, I would like to say, what you can get inspired from, by Serge Nubret. So we're gonna get into, after what's impressive about him, what were the things that he preached and that we can take from. So usually I think that, sometimes it's just like on Instagram, there are some sentences that people say, some quotes that are a bit too beautiful to be believed, or like they're a bit too motivational, and I don't particularly enjoy this. They're a bit stereotypical and doesn't always match, the reality of things. But I think that most of what Serge Nubret in his quotes that I gathered, what he said could be really adapted still to natural bodybuilding and to some good advice. So we'll get into it now. So Serge Nubret said, when you love something, it doesn't feel like work. You don't need motivation when you love something. And to be honest, that really helps indeed when you're passionate by something. To me, bodybuilding never really felt like, I was going there and having pain. There is pain, but it's lovable pain, if I can say. Because I love it so much and I have so much motivation, it never feels like a pain. And for the people who are struggling to go to the gym and actually don't enjoy it that much, well, you can try for a while and see if you actually like it. But what you have to do is always make sure that you train well from the start, because one thing that will make you lose your motivation is that you're not getting results. But I'm sure that anyone who starts the gym that is not particularly passionate about it, but still wants to give it a try because he feels interested about it, make sure you go to the gym with the right advice, that you do the right things, and if you get results, that's where you will know if you're hooked for this, practice or not. Well, if you don't get results, like for anyone, even someone who is passionate, you might just lose the motivation because, no results, you don't get hooked. But what's interesting is that imagine you go there and you actually train well, that you get results, you will know from there if you're actually meant to do bodybuilding. If you get results, you do everything right, but you're still not into it, then maybe it's not for you. There are other sports that you can do. But if you actually get hooked to it, then you will know it and you will keep going. Also, Serge Nubret said that, genetics are important to some degree, but are not fundamentals of bodybuilding. He will say that, for example, the mind and the spirit is more important, and I can only agree with this. And I will even add, obviously, well, by the mind, I think he means also, the hard work and being intelligent in the gym, etc. And I think it's totally true. I've heard it so many times, people on the internet or on YouTube that say that you're limited with genetics when you do bodybuilding as a natural, and this is not true at all. And even if Serge Nubret was enhanced, I think that when you train 6 times a week or 7 times a week, 5 hours a day in the gym, you can't say just the guy is enhanced. The guy had a physique that was incredible and he worked very hard for that. I think, enhancing helped a lot, and I think also he probably had great genetics to have such, strong parts everywhere. All his muscles were good, but I think the way he worked hard also helped him a lot, and that is right for with this quote, and that is very true for natural bodybuilders, especially these times when we think that natural bodybuilders can be limited by genetics. It plays a certain role, but it's not as big as people claim it to be. You can't change your genetics, but you control what you can do with them. And I think that, bodybuilding is a game of proportions and actually understanding where you're gonna put these muscles once you understand your morphology, you can also adapt the exercise selection and, you know, train very efficiently according to who you are. And so he's very true in that aspect. Another thing that he said is eat a lot and train hard and you will succeed. And this is very true. Obviously, we don't need to go into the hyper bulking, massive bulking, where you're just gonna end up being too fat. You want to, you know, bulk moderately, but basically eating a lot, eating healthy, feeding your muscle with nice food, and training hard and thinking about progression over time is what's going to get you to the good level. And he really here summed up what was the most important about bodybuilding. Train hard, which means training hard means also training, you know, efficiently and regularly, and eat enough food, or enough that it fills your muscles when you're resting and that you reconstruct them behind. That's the very most important. And I think that most of the people who don't know much but start doing these two advice, they get actually decent results, and they don't need to go into scientific very precise things that in the end don't help at all. Like we always say in the fitness industry, in natural bodybuilding, usually we're not very much for science because it's too detailed for things that are not yet proven, that sound logical and good to the eye, but that doesn't really reflect reality. Now we're going to talk about Serge Nubret workout, something very interesting. And I will say that Serge Nubret was working out 6 days a week and was training around 5 hours to 6 hours sometimes a day. And that was an intelligent way, I think, to train at such an advanced level. If you followed me, you know, on this channel, I used to work out sometimes 4 to 5 hours a day, even as a natural bodybuilder. And I know that it sounds impossible, etc. But all my life was turned into bodybuilding, and I managed to do this. And I was trying to make a program that is very intelligent in a way that I can actually give as much recovery as I can between the muscles. And maybe sometimes I overworked, maybe a little bit, but I loved it too much that I don't even care that I worked out too much. I just wanted to be there. And so one thing that I noticed when I was training very hard is that these many long hours in the gym is that obviously you burn also a lot of calories. And I think I made the best of both worlds. I was building muscle, but at the same time I was burning so much calories that, you know, with everything that I was eating, I wasn't overly basically adding weight. I wasn't becoming obese because I was eating maybe 5,000, 6,000 calories a day. But the fact I was training so much helped me keep my weight to normal levels and not going too much towards, you know, being way too fat. I was maybe around 18-20% body fat, which is, you know, at the end of my bulking phase basically. So I think that that's what also he wanted to do. He wasn't particularly doing cardio, Serge Nubret, but, you know, his 5-hour long session were cardio in a sense, because he spent so much time there lifting weights that this would burn a lot of calories. So that's a pretty intelligent way to bring two things together. You basically build muscle, but you do your cardio at the same time because you spend that much time in there. Serge Nubret was not, you know, the kind of guy to say, well, I can get this physique by just training 5 times a week, 1 hour. We see a lot of bodybuilders nowadays who do this. I still don't know how they do it, in the sense that I think the drugs help them still a lot, and perhaps, you know, the genetics and the response to the drugs. I firmly believe that you still gotta work hard, you know, to get great results and be a champion, at least as a natural bodybuilder. And so I don't say that you have to particularly work out, you know, 4 hours a day, etc. And I would advise most people not to do it because they've got a life and they've got other things to enjoy. But most good natural bodybuilders that get to an elite level usually spend at least 15 hours a week in the gym. That's, you know, usually what they do. But I can only encourage you as well, before even thinking about quantity, to prioritize quality and have very good basics. And then if you feel like you want to prioritize bodybuilding more and that you get stuck despite being so efficient with your workouts, then you might have to add a bit of quantity and volume to your training. So on a Monday, a Serge Nubret session would look like chest, quads and abs. Then you would do on Tuesday back, hamstrings and abs. Then you would do Wednesday shoulders, arms, calves and abs. Then Thursday chest, quads and abs. Friday back, hamstrings and abs. and on Saturday shoulders, arms, calves and abs, and then on Sunday rest but abs only. So I think if we look at Serge Nubret program, there's some things that for myself I wouldn't particularly do, but after all, you know, if you also think in a way that Serge Nubret really wanted to focus in, you know, what can be interesting is that when you do a special day for just one muscle, you're so focused that you do a very good session just for that muscle. And so I can understand, for example, that you would put, you know, shoulders the day after back, although I really wouldn't recommend this type of training for most people who want to optimize. I would put back and shoulders the same day, or at least back and rear shoulders, because when you do your back, you will work on your shoulders quite a lot, and especially the rear shoulders. So for most beginners, for most people who go to the gym and want to be efficient while having a good life on the side, I recommend to group the muscles that, you know, go well together, to be efficient and actually rest in between those days, and, you know, take advantage of an efficient program. Here, Serge Nubret was a professional, and in a sense, as I said, when you start your session by the muscle you wanna, you know, progress for. For example, here, if Serge Nubret wanted just to do like a shoulder session, or at least start with shoulders and wanted to split it from the back sessions, I can really understand that, you know, you would feel very focused on these shoulders that day, and that if you do back, for example, before, then you kind of like lose a bit this focus just for the shoulders. And again, he was a professional bodybuilder who also was enhanced, and so he could probably allow himself to do things that naturals, in my opinion, shouldn't possibly do, and that natural bodybuilders should be a bit more intelligent about. But again, this doesn't take the fact that maybe I didn't look at the program inside, but Serge Nubret was still working very hard, and that working appropriately towards, you know, what he was liking the most, and that although most, you know, enhanced bodybuilder will sometimes have exercises that look very similar, and that we could actually shrink their program so they don't do things that are unuseful. I think Serge Nubret probably still had a pretty intelligent program inside, you know, the exercises and I mean the muscle groups that we just listed from his weekly program. So one thing that is interesting about Serge Nubret is that he still also had a program, as I just described, that was always the same every week and consistent over time. Being, you know, consistent with your program, with your exercises that you do, the reps and sets that you measure over time is very important. To be regular is very important. And he also trained most of his muscle 2 times a week, which as a natural, I think, is pretty important. He was doing a lot of volume that I wouldn't recommend to naturals, but I would recommend the frequency. You know, if you can at least train 2-3 muscles twice a week and other muscle once a week, that's already very good. You know, being frequent, not particularly with a massive volume, but being frequent enough and train them 2 times a week at a high intensity, where, you know, you go close to failure, can be very good as a natural. So that's something great also to take from Serge Nubret. So what has become Serge Nubret? Well, unfortunately, he passed away in 2011, but when he was 70 years old, he still had 20 inches arms. You can see him in videos training hard still until his, you know, the end of his life. So it's quite inspiring. Of course, we don't exactly know, you know, speculate about how he died, etc. Maybe the steroids didn't help, and this is also why I think that, you know, you should follow the natural path, because in the end, it's the most important is, you know, to have a decent health and to last long despite building muscle. But still, I think that it's not for that we can't look at Serge Nubret and really try to inspire ourselves from what he did and the good things that he did, that we can now you know, transfer to natural bodybuilding into advice as well. Although he took drugs, etc., he really wasn't for drugs, and I mean, very high dosage. Maybe, you know, the dosage he took was already way too much for most people, and obviously, in my opinion, they still took a lot back then. But I think he didn't like the fact that people relied more and more on drugs nowadays rather than hard work, which is something that he always kept despite taking drugs. He was always working hard, and we can't take this away from him. When Serge Nubret was older, he was training still 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. So just like before, 6 days a week, but he wasn't training particularly as a horde, which is totally normal, but 2 hours a day when you're 70 is a lot, you know, 6 times a week. So props to him again for that. So may he rest in peace, and thank you, Serge Nubret, for allowing, you know, to make these inspiring videos. Now I'm just gonna sum up the key points of this video that as naturals you should remember. I would advise, you know, that you stick to your routine once you found out what works. You can do high reps workouts as long as you don't forget about progression over time. You have to stick to the basics even at an advanced level, but you just have to capitalize more on these basics as you go on, and to not give up if you feel like you're stagnating. Focus on the basics, try to improve to be more efficient in the gym, and this will work out. You've got a very long way before you hit any natural limit. That's a promise. You have a lot of potential, and usually the limits come from the priorities in your life. Sometimes you just might have not the time to work out that much, and that limits you in your progression, but it's usually not a problem of genetics or natural potential. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I tried to sum up. There was so much things that we could say about Serge Nubret that I'm not gonna go for an hour and a half videos. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did so, feel free to like, to share and subscribe. Ask any questions that you want. I will answer them, and I wish you soon a happy new year. Take care of yourself.